So the 1/16 e-revo, the Merv build, one of the things that I want to do is I want to change this gray to black. So I'm going to use this RIT dye here to do that. One of the first things I'm going to have to do is remove all the parts and pieces from the gray portion of this chassis as it is. So let me do that. All I'm going to need is a 2 millimeter. So now with all the other odds and ends off of this chassis, one of the only other things that I need to remove, yeah, I'm going to clean that off of there a little bit, but is the battery doors. In order to do that, I'm going to use my tool to just press down and relieve these out. By the way, that right there is one of the handiest tools when working on RCs. So I have done this dye job thing before, and one of the things that I noticed is if you have some light scuffing on the major showing areas, it comes through in the dye and you can see it really well. So what I'm going to try, and I don't know if it's going to work, is I'm going to take some light steel wool, very, very light steel wool, and I'm going to go ahead and scuff those areas that you can see rather apparently when the vehicle is put entirely together. I don't know if this is going to help or not, but I'll go ahead and try it. Another one of the items that's going onto this car is the servos. That's the Savox SW0250MGs. Well, I don't want them blue. I want them black. So I'm kind of thinking about going ahead and putting them in this dye process also. This I've never done. I know these are a waterproof servo, but you probably shouldn't be submerging them for any length of time. But I'm going to go ahead and do it and see if I can go ahead and dye these servos and even some of the extension line in the process. In order to do this, I'm going to use my kitchen skillet. My electric kitchen skillet will work just fine for this. All you have to do is start adding water, hot water, warm water. You do want it warm, but you don't want it too hot. So I'm going to start adding water to it. Currently, I have it set on 225. I want to bring the temperature up, and then when we add the color and the parts, I will lower the temperature just so that it's a very low simmer and keeps the water warm. Now with the water up to temperature, I'm going to go ahead and drop the temperature of the water just to where it keeps it warm. And I'm also going to take my RIT dye. I've already taken the seal out of the dye, but I'm going to go ahead and shake it up and give it a good mix before I remove the cap and put it in the water. Now this stuff is very concentrated. You can use the liquid, you can use the powder. It really does not matter. There's no difference at all when it comes to doing this kind of job. But I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of water in the container just to remove the rest of the dye from the container. Some things will dye and some things won't, but one thing that you can use is your normal cooking equipment. This will clean right up and you can turn right around and cook food in it. Although using a wooden spoon, the dye is going to soak into this, but not very good of a spoon anyway. So you may want to use a utensil that you don't care that much about. Just be very ginger when mixing up the dye bath. Some countertops, the dye will not stick to. Some countertops will soak it up like a sponge. Now the dye bath is ready. I'm going to take my freshly cleaned chassis and slowly submerge it into the dye, making sure that it completely covers the part that I'm looking to dye. And like I said, I don't want my Savox servos to be blue. And this might not be the smartest thing, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to see if I can dye the chassis and part of the extension lead black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly submerge that into the water. Probably not recommended. I'm going to take a little piece of electrical tape just to stick it onto the connection and stick that somewhere so that I don't lose it in the dye bath. Now with the parts in the dye bath, we'll see if the servo thing works. We're going to let this simmer. We're going to continue to check on it very frequently just to see its progress. It has now been about 20 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and check this. I did check one little thing before just to see where things are at. And as a tip, if you don't want to stain your hands, you can put on some rubber gloves. Maybe that will help. So let's see what's happening with these servos here. And that's definitely getting darker. It still has very much a blue tint to it. So I'm going to go ahead and resubmerge that. But it doesn't appear that the wires are getting dyed. So I'm going to go ahead and leave those out of the bath. I'm going to go ahead and check this one here. And yes, that one is also getting darker, but it is still blue. So I'm going to just leave that in the bath and see what happens. As for the chassis, kind of hard to see on the camera, but the chassis is getting dark and I am liking it. It's still not quite where I want it, so I'm going to go ahead and leave her in the bath. But depending upon how dark you want stuff, how light you want stuff, you can continue the bath or not. I have agitated the water again, so I'm going to let this soak for just a little while longer. So here I am at the 25 to 30 minute mark. I did just check the parts, and the servos look like they could be just a little bit darker, and I do want it to seep into that chassis really, really well, because I may end up having to cut into that chassis. But there's plenty of YouTube videos on how to do this. This is just how I'm doing this. I just unplugged my skillet and I'm going to let it start to cool by itself. So here about the 30-minute mark, I'm taking it off the heat and I'm going to start to let the water cool by itself, bringing the temperature down slowly. As for the servos, yeah, it took a lot of that blue color away. They won't stand out like a complete sore thumb, but they're not quite as dark as I would have liked them. Nevertheless, they're actually kind of, and it's hard to see on camera, they're actually kind of almost a purple. But hopefully I didn't destroy the servo, and they won't stand out like a complete sore thumb. With the chassis wet, she is looking very good. She is in black. She is definitely in black. Hopefully, let's see what happens when she's dried off. Now with everything dried off, you can see that chassis, if my camera would like to focus for me, you can see that chassis turned out really, really nice. That is black. Could have done a little better job there where I didn't clean it off well enough. But other than that, no standing out of that factory gray color, which I was looking for. It appears that the steel wool did a decent job at taking off any surface scratches, gave it a nice flat black look. The servos didn't turn out quite as well as I would have liked, but nevertheless, they did turn out kind of interesting, and they're not going to be bright blue and standing out like a sore thumb. So that's better than nothing, and hopefully I didn't destroy them in the process. But we'll find out as I put this thing together. So thank you very much for watching. If you're interested in how this build comes along, make sure you subscribe.